Direct object and indirect object pronouns can be kind of tricky sometimes, especially when it comes to choosing one over the other. In today's lesson, we will see how to use them and how to choose the correct one. Ciao a tutti! My name is Stefano and I am an Italian teacher. If you're new to the channel, benvenuto or benvenuta, and if you don't want to miss any future Italian lesson, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. In today's lesson, we will talk about pronouns, but first of all, what's a pronoun? Well, a pronoun is a very short word that we use all the time in Italian, and of course you do the same in English, that replaces another word. Of course, when we're speaking, we don't want to repeat things over and over again, so we use pronouns to be less repetitive when we're speaking. In Italian, we have a lot of different pronouns, but in today's lesson, we're going to focus on direct object and indirect object pronouns. Let's start talking about direct object pronouns, but before we talk about the pronouns, we need to understand what a direct object is. Well, a direct object is the object of our action. So for example, let me give you an example to better understand how this works. If I have this sentence, Io mangio una mela. Io mangio una mela. Io is going to be the subject of the sentence, so the person doing the action, in this case, I. Then you have mangio, eat, that is the verb, so I eat. And then what's the object of the action? What's the thing that the subject is eating in this case? Well, la mela, the apple. So io mangio una mela, I eat an apple. Apple, mela, is going to be the object of our action. The reason why this is called a direct object is because it is the object of our action, but at the same time, it's also because it is not preceded by any preposition. This is a trick that you can use to understand whether a word in a sentence is a direct object or not. If the word you want to replace is not preceded by any preposition, like in this case, I have una mela, so no preposition before the word mela, then this is going to be a direct object. And because it is a direct object, it can be replaced by a direct object pronoun. Let me give you another example. Io chiamo Stefano. So again, here we have io, the subject of the sentence, chiamo, to call, chiamare, so I call, the verb of our sentence, and then Stefano. Stefano, again, is going to be the object of our sentence, and it is a direct object because it is not preceded by any preposition. So, io chiamo Stefano, I call Stefano. And again, Stefano can be replaced by a direct object pronoun. Now, if you don't remember what the direct object pronouns are, let's revise them very quickly. So we have mi, that means me, ti, you, lo, him, la, her, ci, us, vi, you, plural, and li, them, masculine, le, them, feminine. Mi, ti, lo, la, ci, vi, li, le. These are the direct object pronouns and can be used to replace a direct object in a sentence. So now let's go back to our previous examples. Io mangio una mela. Now, una mela is our direct object. It's feminine and singular, so it can be replaced by la, it. Now, we don't really have it in Italian because we only have lo, him, and la, her. So for this reason, it can be both lo or la according to the gender of the word you're trying to replace. Now, since here we're trying to replace una mela, that is feminine, we're going to use la. So, io la mangio. I eat it. Now remember that pronouns are put before the verb in Italian. So since we have a present here, we're going to say io la mangio. The rules about the position of pronouns in Italian can be kind of tricky. So here in the present we would put it before, and we would do the same with passato prossimo or future. But for example, when it comes to imperative or infinitive, the rules change. If you're interested in this topic, let me know in the comments below and I will make a video about this. Now let's go to our second example. Io chiamo Stefano. Now Stefano is masculine and singular, him, so I'm going to use lo. Io lo chiamo. I call him. Alright, I hope this makes sense. Now let's start talking about indirect object pronouns. And again, we need to talk about what an indirect object is. An indirect object is a person or thing to whom the action is directed to. Now the idea here is completely different. With a direct object, we are talking about the object of the action. But with an indirect object, we are talking about the person receiving the action, the person to whom this action is directed to. For example, if I say mando una lettera a Maria, mando una lettera a Maria, you can understand that Maria is not the object of the action, because the letter is. What am I sending? Well, I'm sending a letter, so letter is going to be the direct object of our sentence. But Maria, the person receiving the action, the person to whom the action is directed to, well, that's going to be the indirect object of our sentence. And also, as you can see, Maria is preceded by the preposition a. That is very important to remember, because indirect object pronouns are going to replace a word or a name that is introduced by the preposition a. So a direct object doesn't have a preposition in front of it, but an indirect object does, and it always has the preposition a. Let me give you another tip that I think is gonna help you, because in Italian we have two big categories of verbs that usually take an indirect object. Now, when I say that these two categories of verbs take an indirect object, I'm not saying that they take an indirect object only, because they might also take a direct object. Think about the sentence we were talking about before. Mando una lettera a Maria. In this case, the verb mandare takes both a direct object, una lettera, and a Maria, an indirect object. That is totally normal. Verbs can take both. But what I'm trying to tell you here is that if you have a verb from these two categories, you can add an indirect object in your sentence. Because of course, not all verbs can take an indirect object. Think about the verb mangiare, to eat. You cannot say that you're eating an apple to someone, for instance. So that's what I'm trying to say here. Verbs taking an indirect object can be divided in two categories: verbs of given and verbs of oral and written communication. The list is pretty long, but I'm going to give you the most important verbs. Let's start with verbs of given. We have dare, the most common one, to give, inviare, to send, mandare, to send as well. They are synonyms and they can be used interchangeably. And regalare, to give as a gift, to gift. Then let's talk about the verbs of oral and written communication. We have parlare, to speak, chiedere, to ask, and rispondere, to reply, to respond. Before giving you some examples with these verbs, let's revise indirect object pronouns very quickly. The indirect object pronouns are mi, to me, ti, to you, gli, to him, le, to her, ci, to us, vi, to you, plural, gli or loro, to them. Now, wait a second. Let's bring back also the direct object pronouns. See, I mean, they're pretty much the same, honestly. The biggest difference, even the trickiest one, is third person, singular and plural. So that is what you need to focus on. And also that is why it's very important to understand whether the thing you're trying to replace is a direct object or indirect object. Because yeah, it's not gonna affect the me, ti, or ci, vi part, but it's going to affect the third person. So lo, la, gli, le, and li, le, gli, loro. Now, let's go back to our previous example. Mando una lettera a Maria. So in this example, we're not going to replace the direct object, but we're going to replace the indirect object, a Maria. Now, since Maria is preceded by the preposition a, and Maria is the person to whom the action is directed to, I'm pretty confident to say that it is an indirect object, and can be replaced by an indirect object pronoun. Maria is feminine and singular, so I'm going to use the pronoun le, to her. I send a letter to her, or I send her a letter, as you say in English. In Italian, that is going to be le mando una lettera. Le mando una lettera. So the question is, direct or indirect? Well, let me give you a few tips on this one. When you're trying your best to understand whether the thing you're trying to replace is a direct object or indirect object, ask yourself these 3 questions. Is the noun or name you're trying to replace the object of our action? Well, then it's going to be a direct object and it's going to be replaced by a direct object pronoun. Is the name you're trying to replace the person to whom the action is directed to? Well, then it's going to be an indirect object and it's going to be replaced by an indirect object pronoun. So here I'm saying name and person because usually an indirect object is a person, but not all the time. Sometimes it might be an animal, but it might also be a thing. But most of the time it's going to be a person. And then finally, the most important question. Is the name you have preceded by the preposition a? Well, if the name you have is preceded by the preposition a, it's not going to be a direct object. It has to be an indirect object. Of course, when I'm talking about the preposition a, I mean a in the sense of to a person, because if you say something like vado a Roma, I go to Rome, that a, that to is not the same kind of to, because in that case we're talking about a place, so it's completely different. But if you have a plus the name of a person, so to plus the name of this person, then probably is going to be an indirect object. Let's look at a few examples to better understand how to make this choice. Let's start with this sentence. I bambini guardano il film. I bambini guardano il film. Now here we're trying to replace il film. Now, il film is not preceded by any preposition, and of course is going to be the object of our action. The kids watch the movie. For this reason, il film is a direct object and it can be replaced by a direct object pronoun, that in this case, since il film is masculine and singular, is going to be lo. I bambini lo guardano. La mamma prepara i biscotti. La mamma prepara i biscotti. Now here we're trying to replace i biscotti, and i biscotti is going to be the object of our action, and since it's not preceded by any preposition, then we are pretty confident to say that it is a direct object and can be replaced by a direct object pronoun. In this case, i biscotti is masculine and plural, so we're going to use li, them. La mamma li prepara. The mom makes them. The cookies. Ho chiesto a Roberto perché non era a lavoro. In this sentence, we're trying to replace a Roberto. And this is pretty easy. We have the verb chiedere. Ho chiesto, I asked. So it's a verb of oral and written communication. And we also have the preposition a. So we can say that a Roberto is an indirect object. And we can replace it with an indirect object pronoun. Gli. We're going to use gli to him because Roberto is masculine and singular. So, gli ho chiesto perché non era a lavoro. I asked him why he wasn't at work. And then last sentence. Gli studenti rispondono al professore. Here we're trying to replace al professore to the professor. So here again we have rispondere. Rispondere is a verb of oral and written communication, right? And also we have the preposition a, al professore. So we're going to replace al professore with an indirect object pronoun. And again it's going to be gli. Gli studenti gli rispondono. The students respond, reply to him. I hope this makes sense, but I just want you to know something. This is not gonna work all the time. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because sometimes verbs in English don't take the preposition, but in Italian they do, and vice versa. So if we look at one of the examples we were talking about a second ago, ho chiesto a Roberto, in English you say I asked Roberto. You don't add the preposition to, but in Italian we do. Or think also about the verb to give, dare. In English you say, I give her the letter. But in Italian we say, I give the letter to her. Le mando una lettera. Mando una lettera a lei. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that it doesn't really matter whether the verb takes the preposition or not in English, but you need to look at the Italian verb, not the English one. So if you don't know whether a verb takes the preposition or not in Italian, just do a quick search on a dictionary, for example, word reference. For example, if you look up the verb dare in word reference and then you click on Collins, you're going to find as the first result, dare qualcosa a qualcuno, to give someone something or to give something to someone. This way you can understand how the verb works, what preposition the verb takes, and also what pronoun you're going to use with it. And no worries, this will take time to sink in. You will make mistakes when you speak, and that is totally fine. You'll just need to practice a lot, and eventually this will be extremely natural for you in the future. Now, before we finish this video, let me just give you another tip. We have 4 verbs in Italian that take a direct object because they are not used with any preposition. But in English, they do use a preposition. Now, since these verbs are very, very common, I thought on adding them in this video. The verbs I'm talking about are ascoltare, to listen to, cercare, to look for, aspettare, to wait for, guardare, to look at. Let me give you a couple of examples with these verbs. Ascolto la musica, la ascolto. I listen to music, I listen to it. But we don't have the to in Italian. We just say I listen music, ascolto la musica. Cerco un libro di grammatica. Lo cerco. I'm looking for a grammar book. I'm looking for it. In Italian, we don't say cerco per un libro di grammatica. We just say cerco un libro di grammatica. No preposition. Aspetto i miei amici. Li aspetto. I'm waiting for my friends. I'm waiting for them. And again, we don't say aspetto per. We just say aspetto plus the object, i miei amici. Giovanni guarda la luna piena. Giovanni la guarda. Giovanni looks at the full moon. Giovanni looks at it. But again, here we don't say guardare a, to look at, we just say guardare. So as you can understand, all of these verbs do not require a preposition as they do in English. And because of that, they take a direct object. And therefore, the object can be replaced by a direct object pronoun. Whew, that was a long video, but it was a lot of fun. So if you're still watching, thank you. And I hope you liked it. But most of all, I also hope that it helped. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also to subscribe to my channel if you wanna see more. I'm going to see you in the next lesson. Ci vediamo nella prossima lezione. A presto. Ciao ciao!